Who's ready to win an election?
Yeah!
That's right. I didn't get all dressed up for nothing. Hey, couple questions. Who in here believes that South Carolina has to be 50th in education? Nobody, right? Who in here believes that there are hundreds of thousands of our citizens who have to go without health care coverage?
No.
No, that's right. Who in here believes that we should be 15 to 20 years behind our neighboring state on renewable energy?
No.
Well, that's why I'm running for governor, because I don't believe it either. But I can only get there if you do it with me and we get this done together, all right? Yeah. I want to thank some dear friends who've helped me along the way, and Councilwoman Nikita Jackson, thank you for being here. Thank you a lot of guys for doing it. And my dear friend, Representative Andy Powers-Norrell, who's also here. It's a great day for our state.
Yeah!
And it is. It's going to take us all. But I thought I would talk with you a little bit about leadership first, about what I think is important, and the kind of leadership that I think we need in the governor's office. Then I'd like to talk about a few issues, and then talk about where we go from here. Does that sound all right?
Yeah.
Sound good?
Yeah.
So I come at this day, to this moment, with my family. I've been very grateful. My wife, Kirkland, she's from Charleston, a brilliantly talented artist. We have 4 amazing kids, and we all obviously care about the future of our state and our nation. But that's been our whole life. My whole entire life has been focused on serving my community, my state, and my country. And I can point to a number of kind of examples, but Parker, your very kind introduction, I'm very grateful for that. I didn't always have a kind introduction. I spent, actually right after 9/11, I was so motivated by a visit to Ground Zero, really convicted by that visit, that I needed to play a different role. At the time I was a military lawyer, and I'd served with a great pride, enjoyed being a military lawyer. It was an important role, and I was very grateful to have that opportunity to serve, but I felt convicted to play a different role, and so went back and talked to my wife, and at age 37, I decided that I would resign my commission, about to be promoted to major, and enlist in basic training in the infantry. And of course, don't come to me for career advice, right? Just what you want to do. But it unfolded in some of the best experiences of my life, and an understanding of a commitment and service that I think is important and something we need today. But I can remember showing up at basic training at age 37, and I think the drill sergeant thought I failed at everything in life. And they were ready to kick me out of their army because, what was I doing there? So they worked as hard as they could the first day to sweat it out of me and get me to quit. And there was no quit in me, and so I continued on. But at the time I just left the State House. It was summer, actually fall, before the beginning of the next session. And I can remember it was a time when Jim Hodges was serving as governor, and as you mentioned, Parker, we did some great things together. We passed First Steps to School Readiness. How about that? Doing some good, important early childhood efforts and making a difference. Very proud of being the primary author of that. But going from there to cleaning the latrine with a bunch of 17, 18, 19-year-old young kids, which were a tremendous inspiration. It was a radical change in my life. And it wasn't until about a week or two before graduation, when there were some people that were going to show up at graduation that were drawing a little bit of attention, they started saying, "Who is that Smith guy?" And so one morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, the drill sergeant busted the door open and just is screaming. He goes, "Smith, push!" So that meant I was on the ground doing push-ups. And I was like, "Yes, drill sergeant. Smith, you ruined my chicken dinner last night. I go finally get away from all you crazies, and you're all over the TV. Flutter kick, Smith." And I was like, "Oh my gosh." So I roll over, "Yes, drill sergeant," doing flutter kicks, and started talking to all the soldiers. Said, "I can't believe that Smith, you apparently some kind of former Army officer. More push-ups, Smith." So I roll over and do some more push-ups, and then he keeps, it goes on for too long, right? Finally, sweat's all beating up in my face, and I'm about to just give up. And finally, after a long while, he gets in my face and says, "Smith, I can't believe it. You mean I can smoke a lawyer, a former officer, and a politician all at the same time?" I said, "You a drill sergeant's dream, Smith." But he got me ready. He got me ready for some important days ahead. and so did the other drill sergeants, got us all prepared for a future and a challenge that we would find in places far, far, far from here. And so one of the greatest privileges in my life was leading American combat soldiers in Afghanistan and in southern Saudi Arabia a little bit later, much shorter trip. But it was about, a total sense of devotion and a commitment to each other and their success. And what we were about was just that. And it is leadership. Leadership is love. It is a sense of devotion. It is a sense of total commitment to the success of those to whom you serve. That the focus of what you do and what you're about every day is giving them the resources and setting up those that you seek to serve with the best possibility for success. And it is a commitment that we need, I believe, in the governor's mansion. Because we can look at these things. We don't have to be 50th. I know, and we all know, members of the General Assembly know what we need to do to improve education in South Carolina. And our people deserve it, no matter where they live, no matter where they come from in South Carolina. It's not about a minimally adequate education. We ought not to be shooting so low. It's about a high-quality education that every child has a right to. What parent aspires to a minimally adequate education for their child? And nor should we ever have to even begin to look there. How do we get there? We support teachers. We get back to focusing on what we all know what makes a difference, and having high-quality teachers who are committed to our kids in the classroom. And there are many ways to get there. One, certainly we got to get back to increasing teacher pay. It's not all about money, but it sure has a big part to do with doing the right things. We got to get to the southeastern average of teacher pay. And as governor, I'll do that. We will get there. We're also going to look at the way we have class sizes, particularly in the elementary years. We're going to reduce those class sizes to make sure that that student-to-teacher ratio is where it should be. We're also going to look at innovative ideas like looping or team teaching that they're doing in other states, where they pair teachers, usually 5, 2 more experienced, 3 who are just getting started. There's a team atmosphere. They support each other, encourage each other, the kind of things that helps maintain and continue to recruit and retain good teachers. And we also want to look at how much they're doing. I talked to a teacher from Minnesota who came here to South Carolina, loves teaching, and is doing a wonderful job. But she said, James, I had to reduce my income $37,000. And I went from teaching 5 out of 7 periods a day to 6 out of 7 periods a day. And a whole series of professionalism and things that they were doing to encourage, and participation were no longer there. Well, we can have those things here in South Carolina. We can do these things. It takes leadership to get us there, and the right leadership to focus on the things that really matter. And there's far more we can talk about ways that we know that we can improve education. It's about making the right investments for our future. Healthcare. This is an area where it just baffles. There's no explaining why in South Carolina we have not made more progress in providing access to healthcare for all our citizens, because it's not hard to do. Actually, the hardest thing to do that is to get me elected governor, right? Do that, I'm gonna fix healthcare. And it's like this. There are billions of your tax dollars going to other states to provide health care to other citizens. And meanwhile, those hundreds of thousands of South Carolinians that don't have access to health care, well, I mean, they do, they just don't have coverage for it. They're gonna go to an emergency room and then probably wait to not get any preventive care, so they're gonna come when things are worse and cost more. It's gonna cost 10 times as much in an emergency room. And guess what? We all pay for it in higher healthcare costs and higher insurance premiums, when our dollars should be there to pay for that, because we're all in this together. We're simply not all living on islands. What happens when others aren't covered? It impacts us in our lives. And we ought to be all about everybody's success and access to this important. Even Governor Rick Scott, right, no fan of President Obama at the time, said that he could not in good conscience deny his citizens access to health care. Well, I don't believe that either. And I tell you, as governor, I will fix it, and I'll fix it right away, because all I gotta do as governor is say yes. Yes to our resource to come here, and it is the common sense thing to do. It is the fiscally responsible thing to do, and it is the morally right thing to do. And it'll happen. So let's do it. Another area that is just an area that we have so much opportunity. You know, I've been so grateful to crisscross and go to all manner of places in our state. And I've been so encouraged by the support I see for this candidacy. And you know what I found is it really doesn't have a whole lot to do with me, right? It has a whole lot to do with us and what we want and the kind of South Carolina that we believe in. And this candidacy is the way to get there. I believe it. But when you look at our power and how we manage our energy and who is making those decisions, I know this. Our energy security, our energy future, it is so important. It's important to our economy to keep rates down. It used to be there was a time where South Carolina had among the lowest rates in the country. And it was one of the top reasons we listed as to why your industry should come here, because the cost of energy costs were going to be low. Well, it's no longer the case. We are now among the highest next to Maui and Nantucket, which seems quite absurd. But given what has happened, and Representative Powers Norrell and I are going to go to work tomorrow to begin to fix that and some legislation on the floor of the House. But it's going to take more than just that. I believe our energy future, what we're going to invest in, should be decided by us, South Carolinians, not by an industry deciding what they think is best for their company, but what is best for our future. And y'all are not far from the border up north, and I'll tell you an interesting story. There's a little company in my district in Columbia that I'm grateful to serve. There was a solar company about 12 years ago. They had about 10 employees, and they were working hard to get this solar company off the ground. And they came to talk to me, and I was pushing solar legislation to begin to, open the door to this important low-cost alternative for all of us. And well, we couldn't get it done. They finally closed their doors. Went up 77 just across the border, opened up their doors there, and I noticed at a magazine a few years later, they were named as one of the top 40 fastest growing companies in Mecklenburg County. And they went from 10 employees to 120 employees. It is a multi-billion-dollar industry. It's, employing many, many people, providing a better access to low-cost and more competitive energy, and we should have that in South Carolina. And we will when I'm governor. And one of the ways to do that is, as I was saying, I will make as governor a energy level or a cabinet level energy office, department, and director, secretary. But they will be at the cabinet seat with the rest of those that are currently serving. There's some great, very smart people. They're at something called the energy office. They're in the Brown building, I think in the basement somewhere. They're very smart people doing really good work, helping to decide what our needs are and what we need to have for the future in our state. In terms of energy needs, but I believe that they need to be at the table with the cabinet to help drive this for us all. I also think we're going to need to have somebody accountable, right? Who's responsible? Anybody raise their hand and say, who is responsible to protect me as a ratepayer when it comes to, rates? Well, you all are, exactly right. You are. That is even better than the answer I was going to give. You're right. We all are, but the way you can assert that right is knowing what elected official is accountable when it doesn't go right. Right now, we have a system of bureaucracy which is thankfully being changed through some of the legislation that Representative Powers Norrell and I are working on. But I believe that there should be one person that is the consumer advocate that goes and fights for you when it comes to the rate making process. And that person shouldn't be a part of a larger bureaucracy of government. It should be tied to a statewide elected official that is accountable to you, to all of us, if they fail to do their job. There was clearly a failure to do that job when it came to what happened with the Base Load Review Act and what rates are today. There's no question it was a failure. But who do we hold accountable for? How do we make sure it doesn't happen again? Well, we will be able to do that when we pass legislation to make sure that there is an identified consumer advocate who has the power to advocate on your behalf and who's tied to a statewide elected official if they fail to do their job. So we're going to make that happen. One other thing to mention is, and I mentioned this in the State of the State response the other evening, and actually to tell you kind of a story, Representative Powers Norrell's done a response, and you should look it up. It is very powerful. She did an outstanding job a couple years back. I've done them before myself. Nobody remembers those because they weren't really very good, but I've given them before. And this time I was really getting prepared for this, and it was about 20 minutes long. and they told me I could only have 8 minutes, so I had to cut out a lot of stuff, and focus on what I could. But an area that I thought was so important not to take out was what are we doing in terms of equality and women's equality in our state? Where do we rank, right? Again, all of these issues, they don't have to be South Carolina. They're not who we are. They don't reflect our values, and certainly our ranking is 47th in the nation in terms of women's equality. It does not reflect our values. It's not who we are. And when you look at women make up over half our state's population, they are responsible for part of the income of 2/3 of all of our families. A lot of single parent, women-led families working hard to make ends meet in our state. And they deserve the kind of support, and they deserve equal treatment under the law. Right now, in South Carolina, women make on average 73 cents on the dollar for their male counterparts. If you're an African-American woman, you make about 53 cents on the dollar. Clearly not reflecting our values. We can change this. And actually, this week, myself and again, my partner, Representative Mandy Powers-Norrell, and others, we're going to come forward. We're introducing legislation to require what we're going to call paycheck fairness. It's going to be introduced on Thursday, and we're going to immediately move to calling for a public hearing on the matter and get all of us involved in saying, you know what, that doesn't reflect our values. That's not who we are. It's done in all but 4 other states have this law in place or something like it, and we should have it in South Carolina too. How about it? And we can do all these things. I mean, this is, it's about, elections fundamentally are about our future. What we want for, not us personally, but for the next generation. It's the most fundamental obligation, I believe, of public service, is working not for ourselves, but for those to come. And it's what we do in the military, it's what we do, and I think it's that type of standard we expect from our elected officials that are there to serve us and to focus on making sure that things are fair. So this can't get done. None of this can get done without everyone in this room participating. Without each one of you have tremendous, powerful spheres of influence. At your school here, at church, at work, you come across hundreds of people. You have your families. It is up to, not to me, or to Mandy, or to Councilwoman Jackson even. We're going to be there to make the right decision, but we can't get there if we can't ultimately win elections to deliver on these commitments and on this promise. So, look, this is about all of us. This is our South Carolina. It's what we want to see. So it's not up to somebody down the street or somebody next door or somebody at another school. It's up to all of us. So we can do this. I really appreciate the time with you tonight. I'm happy to answer any questions, but thank you all, and God bless. Appreciate it. I'm happy to answer any question. I didn't touch on something. Yes, sir.
My name is Nick Bradley. I'm curious. I was talking to Mike Manning a while back. We were talking about education particularly, and you spoke this evening about some particular policy things that you'd like to see with education. And we were talking about the state's education superintendent, or whatever, being an elected official, and the fact that a different governor has spent a lot of time campaigning, talking about what he was going to do for education, and then later said, well, I can't really do that because I'm not in charge of that.
Well,
can you speak a little bit?
I will. I mean, look, ultimately, the buck stops with the governor when it comes to education. I think it's the most important job of state government. It is fundamental to absolutely what we do, and I think when it's not working out, it is absolutely a case of leadership. And I just came through a few things. I'm here, and I want to thank Winthrop and the West Forum, named after Governor West, for helping to put this together. Because, look, you can even look at what we ought to be doing in higher ed. Our tuition rates are far higher than what they should be. We ought to be looking at continuing to provide the kind of support we need to for higher ed. But the responsibility is ultimately with the governor's office, and there really isn't, you gotta remember, yes, we live in a legislative state, but it's always about leadership. I've got great confidence in my ability to get things done, even in a Republican General Assembly. Those that know me there know I've got a long record of working on both sides of the aisle, building consensus on the things that matter, and then getting things passed and getting things done. And as governor, I'll be even better able to do that. And I will say, hold me responsible. Look, a lot of these issues, whether it be the condition of our roads, the condition of our pension, the conditions of some of our, agencies, the condition of our schools and portions of our state, it didn't happen overnight. I mean, it took years of, frankly, neglect. And I'll just tell you, I believe that one-party absolute power has not served South Carolina well. It's hard to say that and so I'm not afraid of being accountable to the voters for those decisions. And I will tell you this, I had met with Molly Spearman frequently. I remember serving with her in the House. One of the things that we did together was to pass something called the South Carolina Campaign to Prevent Teen Pregnancy. It was the first of its kind in the state. It has been mammothly successful. It has been a wonderful effort, just largely made successful, not by Molly and myself who passed it, but by the hard work of people that are part of the campaign who've done some amazing work. So I know this. Molly's of the other party, but I'm quite confident that she continues to hold that office. We will have a laser focus on improving education in our state, and I know we'll work very well together because we have before. So, but thank you. Good question. Any other? Yes, sir.
Follow up on that topic. I saw your competitor last week, and it seemed to be his opinion that we should build all control of curriculum and individual school districts to their Board of Education or their local government. How would you feel about that approach in South Carolina?
I don't think that would work, frankly, at all. I don't think that makes much good sense at all. But I would say that there are things that we can learn and we need to learn that, I think, and I've already done this in talking with teachers and those who are on the front lines in education. There's important things to learn to make sure how we're doing our testing. I think there are often things that are inputted and directed by administrations that don't often help with the education process. But we also got to understand, while we are where we are, according to U.S. News and World Report, we need to understand that. But there's also a lot of really good things happening in South Carolina in education in parts of our state. It needs to be happening everywhere. And I go to somebody who I've always admired and appreciated in this area, which is Dick Riley. And Governor Riley, of course, to know Governor Riley, Secretary Riley, is to respect and admire him. And probably no single person has been a greater leader on education and education policy in our state than Dick Riley. And as a young admirer of his, when I was in college, to have him, when he has never endorsed in a primary, in his entire long, very rich life, he chose to endorse me as the next education governor. And I was very grateful for that. And I will deliver on that. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I moved here recently from the great state of Illinois, and we currently have a Republican governor and a Democratic, for the most part, assembly, and it's caused nothing but gridlock. Among so many other things up there, but how would you address that as a Democratic governor?
Great. The question about this, as a Democratic governor with a Republican-controlled General Assembly, will I be able to get nothing done? Well, I can almost point to the past when we've had Republican-controlled General Assemblies and Republican governors. They've done nothing but fight with each other and get nothing done. But I'll say this. I just look at my own track record, right? As a Democratic member of the House, I'm a minority member, I have passed 50 to 60 major pieces of legislation myself, with a lot of help, not all by myself, but I've had a lot of help to do these, because I know how to build relationships based and focused on areas we have in common. That's what I think about all of this, right? So much of our politics today, and I believe we are all better than the politics of today, they're about dividing us, taking us down. I think when we focus on the areas that we all aspire to, we all share in common, we all want good education for our kids. All of the members, whether Republican or Democrat, want these outcomes. But I think we need leadership to focus on our shared aspirations, what we have in common, And when we do that, we actually can move our state forward. It's when we fail to do that, I think, we end up falling behind. But I just point to a long track record of getting lots of legislation done, and not just easy stuff. I mean, I've passed a lot of bills, and it comes from building mutual respect and focusing on things. One big bill that I'm gonna get renewed for the 4th time was the Abandoned Buildings Revitalization Act. And I can tell you, cities and towns all across our state have had a big part of revitalizing their main streets and city centers with this resource. And what it's done is it's increased the economy tremendously. It's increased the revenue generated from now much more valuable buildings that were previously dilapidated, and it's part of a revitalization across our state. So it's coming up for its 4th renewal, and we continue to show that it's paying huge dividends in economic development and opportunity. And I haven't hardly even touched upon that issue tonight, but there's certainly some things I know we can do to continue to grow our economy, but also make sure it doesn't leave the rest of our state behind. So, yes, sir.
Representative Smith, can I just add something to your answer?
Sure.
As the chairman of the York County Democratic Party, a way that we could help Representative Smith or any Democratic governor is for everyone to make sure that no Republican goes unchallenged on the ballot by a Democrat. We elect more Democrats.
And I'll add to that, because you can look at Alabama and Virginia, and you see districts in which they were thought could not possibly have been won by a Democrat at any time whatsoever. There are districts that Trump won by 24-25%, and the Democrat who filed ended up winning. It was to the shock of many. But, so look, this is what's going on. There is something happening out there that'll, for what it's worth, song, which is gonna take me back to my old band days. But there is something happening out there, and I see it everywhere. I see it wherever I go in all walks of life, who are ready for change, who are fed up and tired like I am of being on the bottom of every list we want to be on the top of, and on the top of every list we want to be on the bottom of. I think we just moved up in sexually transmitted diseases this week. I saw the report. Look, it doesn't have to be that way. None of it does. None of it does. But we have to have leadership that can get us there. And I'm going to do that. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So I'm just thinking, you've been down there in the State House for so long, and you've gotten so much done. But in a way, it seems to be like you're always taking the hard way.
Right.
You didn't have to enlist to go into combat, like you could have proved your patriotism with what you're already doing, things like that. You made things really hard for yourself by being a Democrat. Most men who fit most of your descriptions in South Carolina are Republicans, and it's easier to be a Republican down there because you get to be involved in inside meetings and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Given that it's harder for you as a Democrat down there, why are you a Democrat?
So Amy, and I tell you, I've certainly had so many folks that say, if you just switch parties, it'd be so easy. I had all the time, you just become a Republican, you could walk in the governor's mansion, we'd support you, and there are definite reasons why I'm a Democrat. And one, importantly, is I think we care more about race relations in our state and moving our state forward and coming together. Care more about people. I just believe it to my core, and it's important to me. I also believe that I think when it comes to that kind of leadership, when it comes to not just gaining power for the purposes of holding and maintaining and keeping it, that I just see more that I'm sharing with who really want to serve and are committed to all walks of life and making sure that everybody has a chance and access to high quality education and the infrastructure, and I just see that very much in line with the Democratic Party, and I believe strongly in that. I think, very important. There are a lot of historic leaders that I admire and appreciate that I go back to, and I certainly tend intend to quote many of them, but certainly, John F. Kennedy and Bobby Kennedy and many others that I have sort of admired and sort of cling to and listen to and read their words, And I think also some of the issues that, particularly when it talk about the LGBT community, think about votes way back when it wasn't cool, that were difficult or dealing with things, and being on the right side of history feels good too, so. I think, Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I appreciate what you've been saying about children and education, but I represent the other side of the spectrum, seniors.
Yes.
So I'd really like to hear what you would,
The questions about seniors in our vulnerable community, I think there are a number of things that we need to do to protect seniors, and also look, particularly it impacts healthcare. Are we doing the kinds of things that we need to? It's everything across the board. It is a priority. Actually, we're going to be releasing, we've been working very hard on a series of policy papers and positions that are going to be updated on our website. But I want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to protect seniors, making sure they're not, both in terms of consumer issues and the predatory actions that go on. I know I see it in my own community and those that I represent and I hear from. I also want to make sure in terms of, healthcare oversight. I see too many, particularly those in nursing homes who often can't protect themselves. There's not enough there to make sure that they're protected, or when nursing homes go wrong and make mistakes, that there's not enough accountability in that process. And I think there's a long line of issues that we want to make sure that seniors are protected on, and a priority, and I believe it, and they will be when I go.
so when I knock on your door as a Silverhead legislator, you will.
Let me tell you, absolutely. Not only will they do that, if y'all invite me to the Silverhead Legislature, I will be there.
We'll invite you in September.
Please do, and I know this, and thank you for raising it. Myself and then Representative Joel Lurie and others had the privilege to be there for a couple, and we took several of the initiatives that came out of that. I gotta look those up again, but we passed it. We actually took some of what you all had come up with and put it into law, and could not have done it without y'all's leadership. Thank you. Yeah. Anything else? Yes, sir.
Yeah, a little bit of a follow-up on the lady's question. We know healthcare is a hot topic right now, and in my opinion, something that covers everybody would be really beneficial for middle class, working poor, young people, businesses, entrepreneurs, everybody. So, having said that, would you support Medicare for all?
Absolutely. Now, keep in mind that in terms of universal health care, there's only so much a governor can do, right? A lot of that's driven by federal legislation, but I certainly believe in it. I've been to countries that can do that, and I certainly believe America can do it as well. But there's a lot that I can do as governor to improve health care, not just taking what we have available to us through the ACA that ought to be our resource, but there's a lot more that we can do to leverage that to improve outcomes, right? It's not just receiving the dollars. Again, it's not bigger or smaller government, it's smarter government. It's what we do with it. And so several things I know that I would do to get down some of the details. One is ensuring that each recipient has a medical home, that we make sure that there is a relationship between those that are covered and a physician. And we focus on rewarding for preventative care. We get back to not waiting until people get really sick and it costs a lot more, because I think we can save dollars by being smarter about how we provide it. Also, we'll pick things like, one area that I'm working on is for those families dealing with autism. South Carolina, you're on Medicaid. The rate for your service provider for ADA services, which we know is the one most critical resource needed to make sure that your child can realize their fullest potential. That rate is $13.70 an hour in South Carolina. You take that rate and double it, and we're still the lowest in the nation. Which means essentially, if you're poor, you have no access to it. And what that means is that if you're poor and you don't have access to it, then your child, unfortunately, is more likely to be institutionalized as an adult and cost much, much more. One, that's fiscally irresponsible. Two, it's morally irresponsible, particularly when I know when we can, even now, expand that to the national average, which is about $40 an hour, and deliver this important service and make sure that these kids have a shot at realizing their fullest potential, which I think every child should have that shot. And so that's another thing. And I looked down and I put the amendment up on the House floor. I put it up for $40 an hour. We lost by 1 vote. So I lowered it to $35 and we lost by more votes. And then I looked up and decided to figure out that I could just make the change on my own as governor, so I decided to run. Yes, ma'am.
There's been a number of bills rolling around related to firearms
Right.
in the state.
Yeah.
Could you address that? I know there are a number of different ones.
Yeah, and no question about it. I mean, every town in Moms Demand Action, I appreciate so much of the leadership and work that they've done to bring sense, right? It's not really, they talk about it in terms of gun sense, not necessarily gun control, because I think as a professional, as a military professional, understanding firearms, I've been in places, I know what it's like to be in a place where everyone is armed to the teeth. And I promise you, you don't feel safer, right? It just doesn't achieve that. And so this notion that we wanted, that they're trying to pass, and they're getting pretty close to passing, what they call constitutional carry. And you may have seen the horrific events in Charlottesville with all these people walking around with assault-style weapons on their shoulder in an environment where it would seem totally inappropriate. You can imagine walking down Main Street here through around the campus carrying these assault-style weapons. It's just not appropriate. So I fought that very much, and we've worked very hard to oppose that. It has not become law. It has passed the House once. We've also worked to make sure that we, on a couple of other bases, made sure that we had background checks for those with mental illness, and my friend Representative Leon Skowronakis led an effort to pass that legislation, and it was passed. Then, though, there was an effort to reduce the training requirements for concealed weapons permits, which I oppose. I think it's, I believe, and most everybody that's within law enforcement that I talk to, every law enforcement agency, and every, anybody that I know that's had military experience thinks, you need training to have a concealed weapon to ensure you know how to operate it safely, which is fundamental. To have a deadly weapon, you ought to have some training and certification on it. Well, they were successful in reducing that time requirement over our significant opposition. I'm certainly for it and would, as governor, certainly sign legislation that would eliminate the gun show loophole that is allowing for sales to be made without any background check. Fact is, in South Carolina, we have an immediate background check. It's by and large, if you are qualified and you have no history that would prohibit you from purchasing a weapon, it doesn't add but a minute or two or a few minutes onto the process. And most gun owners I know have no objection to all of these very common sense measures to ensure we have responsible gun ownership in this state. And as someone who is certainly an avid hunter and is certainly served my nation and has carried weapons and understands exactly what they can do, I'm for very much having sure we have common sense, responsible gun laws in South Carolina. So I'll continue my opposition to those things, and certainly as governor, you would see me vetoing a constitutional carry bill should it ever come to my desk.
I'm not sure I understand what you're saying about that. What laws should there be about someone going out and buying, carrying a gun? What should there be in terms of gun control?
Well, I've said everything in terms of about what we've prevented or tried to prevent from passing. I certainly think we should make sure that everyone has a background check, that they are subject to having all kind of the mental health stuff.
I'm sorry, but someone needs a background check. What does that mean? If they've done, what does that mean? What prevents someone from?
Well, I tell you what prevents it, what's in the law now, sir. If you have a felony, you're prevented from purchasing. If you have some sort of court order declaring you to be mentally ill, you're not permitted to purchase it. Certainly those things I think we want to also keep out of the hands of those that would be on any particular federal watch list, if they would be inclined to do harm with that. And that is done by and large today. It's available on an immediate background check. The only place it's not available in is at a gun show, and I believe it should be. So I would certainly advocate for that. Anybody else? Well, yes, sir.
Back to those here, so. We know that former governor, Haley, she had refused to expand Medicaid. And, he doesn't seem to want to do anything with it either. As governor of South Carolina, would you support expanding Medicaid?
Absolutely. Without a doubt, no question. Now, we're gonna write our own plan, as I've described. We're gonna do things our way. We'll inherit our dollars and we'll spend it for South Carolinians. Yes, 100%. Yes, ma'am.
So, as governor, what are you trying to work with in getting the opioid crisis down in South Carolina?
Great question. The question about the opioid crisis in our state, and that was also a portion of the response of the state, which I could not fit in. But I am very involved in a couple ways. One, I'm actually one of the lawyers bringing the lawsuit to hold Purdue and others accountable for what they've done to our state. And that's been an important thing. I'm not the only one. I'm part of a larger team taking important steps to make sure they're held accountable, and the state has those resources that I believe they need to direct here in order to make sure that we have the treatment programs that are necessary. I think certainly some of the things that actually Governor McMaster's already done to try to control the number of prescriptions is an important step. I also believe, and I've got the report from my dear friend and fellow Representative Eric Bedingfield, who's been a leader on this issue, tragically after he lost his own son, to focus on making sure that we had the availability of resources, we had accountability and control of the drugs. Bottom line, I think much of what the FDA did to approve and to expand approval of this drugs has fed a system that clearly gets individuals to 80% of those that were on prescription drugs end up being on illegal heroin and other opioids. And of course, many of those, because of their condition, are very, very ill. Many die. Actually, recently there was a report that for the second year in a row, the human life expectancy has been reduced, and they attribute it to the opioid epidemic that's across our nation. And so I think what we have to do is find a way to return and get rid of that. I'll also tell you, I'm a believer in medical cannabis. I think it's long overdue. I'm a co-sponsor of the bill, and it without a doubt is a much, much, much better alternative, and I think we ought to encourage that versus opioids. So thank you. Yes, sir.
As far as that goes, would you support a legislative approach to approve medical cannabis?
I'm a co-sponsor of the bill, yes, sir.
If that does not pass as governor, would you push for a referendum?
We could have a referendum. I think, unfortunately, in South Carolina, you can't pass laws by referendum. You can only, it'll give a vote. I think it would be a good thing to do. Heck, I wouldn't mind having a referendum on the ballot this November about the issue, because I think the vast majority of our state supports it. And for the right reasons. It's gonna make a difference for a lot of families who need it. Those dealing with significant debilitating illnesses, particularly seizure-related illnesses. We know it's gonna make a difference, so. But yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
In terms of very current events, can you speak to Personhood Bill?
Today, I was there, yes. That's another horribly conceived, and been there opposing that for previous years and previous times when it has come up. But the Personhood Bill, it was so horribly drafted that it even had in law stuff that is factually, medically, totally incorrect. I mean, I can't even begin to tell you the problems, but the whole notion is that also we would consider a person at the moment of conception. And that means all of the laws that protect a person, like, if somebody were in a car accident, then, they would and lost a 2-week pregnancy, you could sue for wrongful death. Or if, like Senator Brad Heather was describing today, which was a situation which is not inconceivable, in which you have a woman who is severely under almost a vegetative state, and the right thing to do would be to, and the family would choose to, in that horrible situation, to take off the care that's sustaining life that doesn't have any real brain activity. But then under this law, you would have to do that for the term of even say a 2-week pregnancy, because otherwise then the doctor would be killing a 2-week pregnancy and be guilty of murder. So there was so much that was so ill-conceived by this effort. And I will tell you this, it was a 19-4 vote to adjourn debate on the bill today. It was in the Senate, I was there in the hearing room for the hearing, and that was a solid vote. That was a vote that sent a message that I don't think it will come up again before the end of the year. But these are things that, look, what a difference an election can make. Let me tell you, if we didn't learn elections matter in 2016, I don't know that we, right? They matter. And so things like vetoing school buses, or vetoing the roads initiative, which we know we all need, it's not gonna happen. It's a whole new day, right? It's a different world that we can have and focusing on different and better things for all of us. So, well, thank you all very much. I'm very grateful for your time.